Welcome to this episode of the Million Dollar Mastermind, where we get real world insights on winning from people who have accomplished amazing things. I'm your host, Larry Weidel, and let's get going. I'm talking to Mitch Joel. How you doing, Mitch?
I'm great, Larry. How are you?
I'm fine, and just found out you're up in Montreal. And how's the weather up there?
Summer everywhere, so it's great. No complaints. We complain when it's too cold. We complain when it's too hot. It doesn't matter where we are.
It does get a little colder than usual up there, but somehow you guys have learned how to survive and thrive.
Yeah, we just all come down to Palm Beach for the winter. That's what we do.
There you go. Yeah. And congratulations on your achievements. You've been getting things done for a long time. You were the founder of 6 Pixels Group. It's a advisory content producing company focused on brands, commerce, and community. And is that still ongoing?
It is. I mean, ultimately, 6 Pixels Group was an incorporation that I had to pull the trigger on because prior to that, I had built with 3 other partners a fairly successful digital marketing agency that we sold to a large public company called WPP. And then when I exited that business, I needed a place to hold all of my speaking events, my book publishing deals, and those sorts of things. So it really is more of a holding company for my activities that I have with a business partner. And we're on the verge of launching a new startup, which I'm in stealth mode, as the business likes to say, but super busy on that. And, still very actively out there speaking, doing my own podcast, creating in the media, radio hits, all those good things.
Is your podcast called Creating in the Media?
No, the podcast is called 6 Pixels of Separation, which is the same name as my first book. Yeah. And I think it's the longest running business podcast in the world. I started broadcasting in 2004 or 5 every Sunday and haven't missed a beat, haven't missed a Sunday since launch. So I think it's the longest consistently running podcast maybe out there.
Congratulations. And how long will that be?
Well, let's do some quick math here. 2005 minus 2022. So you're talking a long time.
That's a long time. So congratulations on that. And looking at your bio, top 40 under 40 award. What is that?
Yes, every year, I think it's every year in Canada and other regions, they do this top 40 under 40 list. And many years ago, because I'm currently not under 40, I was nominated and, really excited to be chosen to be a part of it. And I really loved the event. I loved my other peers that were awarded that award that year. And some of them become lifetime friends who've gone on to tremendous success. More importantly, I decided to get actively involved. And so I remain on the, I don't know if it's a board of directors, but selection process committee and involved with the organization to this day. So helping to pass that award along to other young, successful people. And it's not just in business, it could be in academics, it could be in health sciences and beyond. And as I'm sure you know, there's nothing greater than being able to give back and be active in bringing forward the next generation of great leaders.
Right. And I was, before we got going, we were talking about this podcast and you said yours works same way, the idea of passing it on. And there's a lot of talented people out there.
Yeah. The greatest fake of my life is the fact that I get to spend an hour here and there speaking to some of the greatest thinkers in the world. And I call it a fake because then I just publish it. I mean, truly the publishing is the gateway for me to just have an excuse to read an interesting book, article, or concept, and then reach out to that thinker and say, you want to, be on the podcast.
Yeah. And the thing is that you know what you're talking about. So that's why people love to talk to you. Talk about launching one of the first search engines prior to Google even being out there.
Yeah, I didn't launch it. I launched, I was a part of a meta search engine called mama.com, the mother of all search engines. And at the time there wasn't Google, but a young entrepreneur where I live here had come up with this idea of taking what there was from the search engine base at the time. It was places like Yahoo, AOL, Alta Vista, and others, and aggregating them into a better search result. And this was very early days, and we were coming up. I was helping run the sales team. So we were doing things like, well, telling companies if you chose a particular keyword, we could then target your ad just to those keyword searches. Or, we had developed internally, our technical team had developed the ability to rank searches based on any variable, one of them being a dollar
Right.
amount, which became the ad auction platform. So a lot of these very robust multi-billion dollar based revenue models that we see today were created in this small company, as others were doing at the same time, but just being a part of that and seeing the opportunity and the growth in search and even just connectivity in the web before, like I said, before Google existed, it was a really amazing time to be alive. It was just very fortuitous, a lot of privilege, a lot of luck, and a lot of timing.
When did your, just to kind of get the sequence clear in my head, when did the book 6 Pixels fall into that cycle?
Yeah, a lot later. I mean, a lot later. So in about 2000, 2001, I joined 2 other business partners. We inevitably became 4 at this digital marketing agency called Twist Image. And when I got there, web was already relevant, but we still spent a lot of time convincing organizations why they need a website. So that's the cycle of where that was in the early 2000s. And again, at the time, blogging had just started. I had come from a background of print magazine publishing and writing and journalism. And I just felt, instead of, driving down the highway, knocking on every corporation's door to build a website, that I could leverage my previous skill of writing and publishing to talk a little bit about how that world is changing and transforming and innovating. Yeah. So again, at the time, 2002, 2003, a lot of advertising media people weren't really writing and creating content like that. We started this blog called 6 Pixels of Separation, the Twist Image blog at the time. And I was publishing 7 times a week. And then within a year or two, that's when I decided to change Sundays to, instead of writing, I would talk, because podcasting was very nascent at the time. All of that led to people asking me to speak at industry events and corporate events, which led to the attention of speaking bureaus and things like that. And that's when it really clicked. We started recognizing that, wow, you can get paid to do business development, which is essentially what was happening. That led to introductions and the book. And speaking about the power of podcasting, I had a guest on my show whose book was to be published in several months. That book was called Predictably Irrational. It wound up being Dan Ariely, who's now a world recognized authority and one of the bigger selling books in the past, I don't know how many years. And Dan, who was looking at my stuff, said, you should speak to my literary agent in New York City. And I thought, sure, who would? And that conversation led to a conversation with Hachette, one of the largest book publishers in the world, which led to a deal on Grand Central. And that led to the book, which I think came out, I want to say 2006, 7, or 8. I'm not really sure. So it's quite a while ago.
So it was an organic development of what you were doing. And then you follow that up 2013 with Control-Alt-Delete. And name one of the best business books of 2013. What was the point of that one?
The world just kept changing. And it felt to me like businesses were still in the convince me why I need this versus shifting to this world of how do we move it forward. And so the original premise of Control-Alt-Delete, the subtitle is Reboot Your Business, Reboot Your Life, really was, well, how can businesses really think about this at scale? And I was writing and still blogging and writing articles and contributing to other media outlets. And I just wasn't breaking the spine on that book. It just wasn't coming naturally to me. And then in the cliche moment of being in the shower, I realized the book is 2 parts. You can't reboot your business until you've really thought about how you're going to reboot your attitude and beliefs in what digital is and can be. And that's when it became very obvious to me about what the book could be. And so I broke it up into 2 parts, and I created these things that have changed. these actual functional changes that would be more obvious than let's talk a little bit about the future and where things are going.
Right.
And I believe that those two applications at the time to a business book, was still, again, not something you were seeing cluttering on the bookshelves as you do now. And it was just the right time, right moment. And, both books thankfully did just great, really great in terms of, the big thing was really business development and name recognition. It just kept adding to the portfolio of thought leadership that wasn't just me being Mitch Joel. In fact, if you look at all the assets we ever put out, it was always tagged along with the agency and the brand of 6 Pixels. And so internally as a marketing agency, we would often say that we're managing 3 brands. We're managing Twist Image, which was the name of the agency. We were managing 6 Pixels of Separation, being what we call the publishing arm of the company. And then this individual Mitch Joel, in terms of what, where should I be speaking? What value does it bring? What are the tools I should be using to communicate? So again, primarily as a driver for business development and marketing that just led to being one in which we were generating really solid revenue from as well.
Okay, so let's dig in now. What have you learned what are some things you've learned that are difference makers in developing businesses, things where, that really started, let's just go back to the beginning, that started standing out to you early on, and then you incorporate it into your life, because we already said you read books, you talk to people, and then you wind up, elevating yourself, just by the association and the infusion of those ideas. Talk about, there's light bulbs that go on, there's awarenesses. And once you see things, you can't really not see them, and so I'm sure your eyes go to, Mitch, I always, like you've got the guitars in there. I've wasted a lot of time and money on guitars and banjos and basses and drums and all of that stuff. But I was you get into learning those things. And if you get the wrong instructor, they're going to want to teach you every scale, every fundamental, like train you like you're going to be a concert orchestra player or something. But what was always in my mind was, what's in the mind of that lead guitar player? How do they see the fretboard? Because it's very simple, like BB King, things like that. There's a few notes, and the way they hear us, how do they hear it? And so in your mind, when you look at businesses, you've from the beginning had this interest, and it's developed where you're probably pretty fine-tuned in spotting winning patterns, thinking, approaches. And so where did this start? What did you start noticing as you're sitting in front of your, podcasting and talking with people more, or even in your business,
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, where I actually started in music journalism, and those were the questions that I was trying to understand better. Why is that person on the cover of this magazine? Why does one band succeed when another doesn't? How do you even create a song? I mean, even those 7 notes, like you said, you're very limited, but just the incomparable and just unlimited amount of changes and opportunities.
Right.
And I believe in those conversations, what I really started to understand is the power of what I would call pure art.
Yeah.
That
to interrupt you, your first professional job was interviewing Tommy Lee for Motley Crue.
Yeah. It's all downhill from there, as we like to say, Larry. Yeah.
If you survived that.
I spent more than a decade interviewing, everyone in the rock, alternative, punk, indie genres for many years, and still continue to. I have another podcast called Groove the No Treble Podcast, where I interview bass players. And so I've continued. That's been over 7 years also, where I just try to have these fun conversations like I have on 6 Pixels with musicians and artists. So, getting back to your question, I think one is just pure art. Like, there is some method to the madness, and there is some thinking that you uncover. You do uncover patterns and trends, but you also become very, very aware that a lot of the times, even when everything's done right, it doesn't always work. You have the best band on the best label with the best management and all the, marketing in the world, and the album, doesn't go anywhere. But the real lessons for me come from a couple places. One is reading. I've always put forward the idea that, yeah, you can spend your time on tweets and watching TikTok and all that's fun and great. And I do it just as much as anyone else. But really, if you're spending time reading books, days on end with one particular author, with one concept, it's very hard, whether it's related to your industry or not, to not be inspired or learn or take something powerful from it. So reading is this consumption activity that I feel is still extremely undervalued, and in this day and age, almost underutilized. So if I'm interested in something, whether it's cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or Web3 or whatever it might be, I'm first looking to long form content, written in particular, where I can understand. This is the learning process. I don't think learning has much value unless you're also communicating. And that's the expression of it. And the expression of it for me came in the fact that anybody now in this world can have an idea and publish it in text, images, audio, video, long form, short form, pre-recorded, live. And that's a tremendous power and a gift. Most of us use it for really stupid debates and social media, but the more strategic and smart people, from my perspective, use it as a way to publish and broadcast. And so what's the point of reading and learning if you're not also then taking that information and teaching and sharing it? So the teaching and sharing it then leads to some kind of network or community. And what you realize when people are either following you and you're following them, and they're commenting on your stuff and you're commenting on their stuff, or you're consuming their content and they're consuming yours, is that there is no greater thing we can do as humans than to help better one another. And I used to be very involved in community service, and I still am. And even in the early days, people would say, you're building a business, you're young, like why? Most people don't have the time for it. I just knew, well, how do you build a strong business if there's not a strong community around it to support it? It's not going to happen. So that was another fundamental for me that, Jeffrey Gitomer would say, who wrote the Sales Bible and Little Red Book of Selling, that your network is your net worth. So you take that community and you nurture it into a powerful network. You take those guests who are willing to spend time with you, those stages that you're sharing with other thinkers, to build a sense of community and a network. And then you build on that community by helping bring others in and helping them be better at themselves. And then ultimately, at the end of it, you have to take business really seriously. And what I mean by that is not that it's hour-based or workaholic-based or hustle culture-based. No, I just mean that you have to know that business is always a game of nickels and dimes. And if you can understand how to manage it and measure it and work within it, you can understand the opportunities of it or the limitations that it's going to bring. So when you ask the question, I'm sorry to ramble, those are the pillars, which is reading, sharing, the network, the community, and then ultimately being really serious about the business that's underneath it.
That wraps up this episode. Consider leaving a rating and review if you like what you heard. In addition, I have a free video for you, and it contains my best insights from 20 years of running my own business and also coaching million-dollar earners. You'll find it at whiteelonwinning.com/webinar. Thanks for listening, and do it big.